The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom didn't just open, they groaned as if the building itself was bowing. A silence fell over the room that was heavier than the judgment from moments before. 4 men in charcoal suits stepped through first, their earpieces glinting under the crystal lights. They didn't look at the guests. They scanned the room with the clinical precision of snipers. Then he stepped through. He wore a traditional hanbok blazer over a modern black turtleneck, a fusion of old-world power and new-world lethality. His hair was slicked back, revealing a faint scar that ran from his temple to his jawline. Every eye in the room moved to his hands, large, scarred, and currently gripping a black jade cane. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like the end of the world. 10 minutes ago I was a scholarship girl with a fabricated pedigree, a nobody they could chew up and spit out for a Friday night thrill. Tiffany stood over me, her foot intentionally planted on my trailing hem, her wine glass tilted just far enough to ensure the ruin was absolute. The silk groaned before it snapped, a sound like a dying breath. A splash of vintage red wine followed, soaking into the white fabric of my dress, spreading like a fresh gunshot wound across my chest. Tiffany's laughter was sharp, a jagged piece of glass cutting through the orchestral swell. They had no idea that while they were playing at being royalty, my blood was tied to a throne made of titanium and secrets. I reached for a napkin, but Chloe swiped the tray away, her movements fluid and cruel. I didn't reach again. My hands didn't shake. They remained at my sides, fingers tracing the hidden seam of the ruined dress where a small silver dragon pin was tucked out of sight. I had spent 18 years hiding in the shadows of boarding schools and summer camps, a princess in exile to keep me safe from the wars my father fought in the dark alleys of Busan. Tonight was supposed to be my debut, a quiet entry into the world of legitimate business. Instead, it was becoming a massacre of my dignity. "You look like a drowned rat, Elena," Tiffany whispered, leaning in so close I could smell the gin on her breath. "Did you really think a few pearls and a fake accent would make us forget you're just charity? Go back to the gutter. This dress cost more than your life." She turned to the crowd, raising her empty glass. "A toast. To the girl who thought she could sit at our table while her mother probably scrubs the floors of it." The tap of a cane on marble sounded like a countdown. My father, Kang De-young, ignored the gala host who rushed forward to greet him, his arm sweeping the man aside without even looking at him. He stopped 3 feet away from me. He didn't speak to me. He looked at Tiffany. His eyes were like deep wells of stagnant water, still and terrifying. He reached out and touched the wet fabric of my shoulder, his thumb brushing the wine. Then he looked at the glass still in Tiffany's hand. "That's a very expensive vintage," my father said, his voice a low, melodic rasp. "It's a shame to waste it on the floor. Or on a dress." Tiffany's hand started to tremble. The wine in her glass began to ripple. It was an accident, Mr. Kang." She tripped. "I tried to." De-young didn't let her finish. He took the glass from her hand with a movement so fast it was a blur. He held it up to the light, inspecting it. Then he turned his head slowly toward the lead guard. "Minho. Who is the father of this girl?" "Robert Vance, sir." "Logistics and shipping," the guard replied instantly. De-young nodded, almost to himself. He looked back at Tiffany, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "By tomorrow morning, your father will be in the logistics of cardboard boxes. You will own nothing. Not even the shoes on your feet." He unclipped the silver dragon pin from my dress and held it up for the entire room to see. "You spent 4 years pretending to be one of them to please me, Elena. But you are not a lamb. You are a Kong." He dropped the wine glass. It shattered against the marble, spraying red drops onto Tiffany's expensive silver gown. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Now," my father said, extending his arm toward me. "Let's go home. We have a city to burn." The interior of the SUV smelled of expensive leather and ozone. My father didn't speak as the fleet pulled away from the curb, his silhouette a sharp blade against the neon blur of the city. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't hand me a handkerchief. In the Kong family, blood was the only currency. He tapped his black jade cane against the floorboard, a rhythmic sound that matched the thumping of my heart. "Robert Vance has 3 warehouses in Incheon," my father said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "He also has a daughter who thinks she can spit on a dragon and keep her tongue." He turned to the lead guard, Minho. "The fire should be professional. No casualties. Just a total loss of inventory." Minho nodded, his fingers dancing over a tablet screen. "The insurance policy has a clause for unrest. We've insured the local union is having a very loud rally tonight. It will be an act of God." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I had wanted to be an architect, to build things that stood tall in the light. But as I looked at my father's scarred face, I realized that before you can build, you sometimes have to clear the ground. And the ground was currently occupied by people who laughed while they stepped on me. Why tonight? I asked, my voice finally finding its strength. You could have stayed in Busan. You could have let me handle it. Dae-young turned his head, his dark eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. You handled it by letting them pour wine on you, Elena. You handled it by playing the victim for the sake of a degree I could have bought for you 10 times over. I let you play at being a commoner because I thought it would make you sharp. Instead, it made you soft. Tonight I stop being your father. Tonight I become your teacher. The SUVs pulled into a private hangar at Gimpo Airport. A black jet sat waiting, its engines already whining. We didn't stop for security. The guards stepped aside, bowing so low their foreheads nearly touched their knees. As we boarded, I saw the tablet in Minho's hand. A live feed showed a massive warehouse in Incheon. A small spark at the corner of a crate was already turning into a roar. By the time we reached 30,000 feet, Tiffany Vance's father would be receiving a phone call that his empire was a heap of glowing embers. Morning in Busan felt like waking up inside a steel cage. The Kong estate was a fortress of glass and black stone perched on the cliffs overlooking the sea. I stood on the balcony, now wearing a simple black silk robe, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The news was already breaking. Tragic fire at Vance Logistics. Stock plummets. Rumors of bankruptcy. There was no mention of a girl at a gala. There was no mention of the ghost of Busan. The world only saw the smoke, not the match. Tiffany is calling you, my father said, appearing behind me. He held out my phone. The screen was a frantic blur of missed calls and texts. Elena, please. My dad is losing everything. I was just joking last night. Please tell your father to stop. I took the phone, the glass cool in my hand. I looked at the text. The arrogance was gone. The jagged laughter had been replaced by a whimper. I remembered the way her heel had felt on my dress. I remembered the smell of the gin. I didn't reply. I walked to the edge of the balcony and let the phone drop. It fell silently into the white foam of the waves below. Tiffany's voice was silenced by the Pacific. She has 2 friends, I said, turning back to him. Chloe and Sarah. They didn't pour the wine, but they held the napkins so no one could help. Their parents owned the fashion house that provided the dresses for the gala. Dae-young's eyes sparked with something that might have been pride. A dragon doesn't just kill the hunter. It burns the forest that hid him. He led me downstairs to a room I had never been allowed to enter. It was a vault, but instead of gold, the walls were covered in ledgers and servers. This was the true heart of the empire, the shadow ledger. Every bribe, every favor, and every sin of the Seoul elite was documented here. He pulled out a black file embossed with a silver dragon. Robert Vance wasn't just a shipper, my father whispered. He was a middleman for a cartel in Japan. He was moving more than just electronics through Incheon. He was moving their money. And now that money is gone. The cartel doesn't like losing their investments. They will come for him. And they will come for Tiffany. I realized then that the fire wasn't just revenge. It was a death sentence. By destroying the warehouses, my father hadn't just made them poor. He had made them targets. If you believe that Elena was right to stop hiding and show these bullies who she really was, hit the like button so her story reaches anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong. The following 3 days were a blur of cold efficiency. I sat in on meetings with men whose hands were calloused and whose eyes never blinked. I watched as my father manipulated stock prices with a single phone call. I learned the names of judges who could be bought and politicians who could be broken. But every night I thought about Tiffany. I thought about the cartel. On the 4th night, Minho entered the study. The Japanese have arrived in Seoul. They've picked up Robert Vance. They're holding him at a shipyard. Tiffany and her mother are being watched at their penthouse. My father looked at me. The debt must be paid. Robert can't pay it. The cartel will take it in skin. Stop them, I said. It wasn't a request. Dae-young raised an eyebrow. You want to save the girl who ruined your debut? I want her to live in the world she created, I said, my voice cold. If she dies, she's a martyr to her friends. If she lives as a beggar, she's a warning. I want her to work in one of your factories. I want her to wear a uniform that cost $5. I want her to feel the pilling of the fabric every single day. My father smiled. It was a terrifying, jagged thing. You've learned faster than I hoped. Minho, prepare the team. We aren't going to kill the cartel members. We are going to buy them. Give them Robert Vance's remaining assets in Japan. In exchange, the girl belongs to us. We arrived at the penthouse an hour later. The elevator was lined with gold, but the air inside smelled of fear. When the doors opened, we saw Tiffany. She was huddled on a white silk sofa, the same fabric as my dress. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess. When she saw me, she didn't laugh. She threw herself at my feet, her fingers clawing at the hem of my black trousers. "Elena, please," she sobbed. "They took my dad. They said they were going to hurt us. I'll do anything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked down at her. I didn't feel pity. I felt a strange, hollow distance. I reached down and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up at me. "The girl you joked about is dead, Tiffany. She died in a pool of red wine. You're talking to the woman who owns your father's debt." I pulled a contract from my pocket. "Sign this. You become an employee of Kong Industries. You will live in the dorms. You will work the line. If you ever speak my name or your father's name or look at a camera, the cartel gets a call. Do you understand?" Tiffany grabbed the pen as if it were a lifeline. She signed her life away with a shaking hand. As we walked out, my father leaned on his cane, looking at the city below. "The first lesson is complete, Elena. Power isn't just about killing. It's about the choice not to. But remember, mercy is a debt that must always be repaid." Life at the Kong estate changed. I no longer wore the simple black robes. I wore tailored suits that felt like armor. I spent my days analyzing the shipping routes of the Pacific and my nights learning the art of the quiet kill, not with a blade but with a bank account. But the peace was a lie. The ghost of Busan had enemies, and by revealing me at the gala, he had given them a target. It happened on a Tuesday. We were traveling to the docks for a routine inspection. The motorcade was moving through the industrial district of Busan when the lead car simply disappeared in a ball of orange fire. The shockwave slammed our SUV sideways. Glass shattered. The smell of burning rubber and ammonium nitrate filled the cabin. "Ambush!" Minho roared, his body shielding mine as he pulled a submachine gun from under his seat. My father didn't panic. He sat perfectly still, his hand gripped tight on his black jade cane. "The Saito family," he whispered. "They didn't like the deal we made for the Vance girl." Bullets peppered the armored plating of the car like hail on a tin roof. Minho kicked the door open, using it as a shield. "Move. To the warehouse." I grabbed the pistol my father had forced me to carry. My hands left wet prints on the grip. We sprinted through the smoke, the heat of the burning cars searing my skin. I saw men in gray suits, the Saito enforcers, moving with military precision. We burst into a cavernous fish packing plant. The air smelled of salt and decay. Shadows crawled up the walls, distorted by the flickering emergency lights. "Split up," my father commanded. "Minho, take Elena to the upper gantries. I will lead them into the refrigeration units." "No," I shouted. "I'm not leaving you." Dae-young looked at me, his face illuminated by a muzzle flash from the doorway. "You are the future of this family, Elena. I am the past. The past stays to hold the door. The future runs." He turned and limped toward the back of the warehouse, his cane clicking rhythmically against the concrete even amidst the gunfire. If you believe the quiet brother was the real hero all along, drop a like so the algorithm knows the story matters. The refrigeration unit was a maze of hanging plastic sheets and frozen carcasses. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in a second. My breath hitched in my throat, turning into a white mist. Minho pulled me behind a stack of crates, his eyes scanning the darkness. "They're coming," he whispered. I heard them, the heavy boots of the Saito men. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They moved like ghosts. I looked at the pistol in my hand. I had never fired it. I had never wanted to. But as the first shadow stepped through the plastic sheets, I realized that the time for wanting was over. A man appeared, his face covered by a tactical mask. He raised a rifle. Minho fired, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The man fell, his blood steaming on the frozen floor. "Stay low," Minho hissed. But I saw a second man moving toward my father's position. My father was backed against a wall, his cane raised not for support but as a weapon. He was old and his leg was failing him. The Saito enforcer raised a blade, the steel glinting in the dim light. I didn't think. I stood up. I leveled the pistol, my arms shaking so hard the barrel danced. I remembered the red wine. I remembered the fire in Incheon. I pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. The man spun, a hole appearing in his shoulder. He didn't die, but he dropped the blade. My father didn't hesitate. He swung the black jade cane with the force of a sledgehammer, the heavy head connecting with the man's temple. Silence returned to the freezer, broken only by the hum of the cooling fans. Dae-young leaned against the wall, gasping for air. He looked at me, then at the smoking gun in my hand. "You fired?" "I had to," I said, my voice trembling. "Welcome to the family, Elena," he whispered. But the victory was short-lived. A voice boomed over the warehouse intercom. It was cold, accented, and full of a dark joy. "Dae-young, you've taught your daughter well." But she didn't see the second team. "Check your phone." My father pulled out his device. His face turned the color of the ice around us. He showed me the screen. It was a live feed of our estate. The glass walls were shattered. And in the center of the living room, Tiffany Vance was tied to a chair. But she wasn't alone. Chloe and Sarah were there too, their faces bruised, their designer clothes torn. "The Saito family doesn't just want your money, Dae-young," the voice said. "They want the girls. All of them. They want to show the world that the ghost of Busan can't even protect his own children's friends. Come to the docks. Alone. Or the girls start disappearing piece by piece." The Busan docks at midnight were a graveyard of shipping containers and rusted cranes. The fog rolled in off the water, thick enough to swallow the light of the moon. I sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, my fingers tracing the cold metal of the pistol. My father sat next to me, his jaw set in stone. We pulled into a circle of floodlights in the center of the shipyard. 10 men stood waiting, led by a man in a white suit, Saito Kenji. He held a remote in one hand and a cigar in the other. Behind him, the 3 girls were lashed to a shipping container, their mouths taped shut. Tiffany's eyes were wide with terror, her factory uniform stained with oil. Dae-young stepped out of the car, leaning heavily on his cane. I stepped out behind him. "You brought the girl?" Kenji said, puffing on the cigar. "Good. She's the one who started all this. If she hadn't been so sensitive about a little wine, we wouldn't be here." "The wine was just the catalyst, Kenji," my father said. "You wanted my shipping routes. You used the girls as an excuse." Kenji laughed. "True. But now I have everything. The girls, the routes, and soon your head." He pointed at me. "Give us the girl and I let the other 3 go. They're useless to me now anyway." Tiffany looked at me, her eyes pleading. Sarah and Chloe were sobbing behind the tape. They had spent their lives mocking me, but now their lives depended on my mercy. I walked forward, away from the safety of the SUV. I stopped 10 feet from Kenji. "I'm the one who ordered the fire in Incheon," I said, my voice projecting across the docks. "I'm the one who broke the Vance family. If you want the ghost of Busan, you have to go through me." Kenji sneered. "Bold. But stupid." He waved a hand. 2 men moved toward me. Suddenly, the shipping container behind the girls exploded, not with fire but with sound. The side doors burst open and Minho's team poured out like a swarm of hornets. They had been inside the container the whole time, waiting for the signal. The night exploded into gunfire. I dove behind a stack of wooden pallets as bullets shredded the air. I saw Kenji scramble for his car, but my father was faster. Despite his limp, he moved with a terrifying focus. He didn't use a gun. He used the cane. He caught Kenji by the throat, the black jade pinning him against the tire of the white car. "My daughter isn't a victim, Kenji," my father roared over the sound of the battle. "She's the architect of your downfall." I saw one of the Saito men leveling a rifle at my father's back. I didn't wait. I stepped out from behind the pallets. I didn't shake this time. I fired 3 times. The man fell. I ran toward the girls. I pulled a knife from my belt, a small surgical blade. I sliced through the ropes. Sarah and Chloe fell to the ground, gasping. I didn't help them up. I moved to Tiffany. I ripped the tape off her mouth. She didn't scream. She just stared at me. You saved us." "I saved my investment," I said. "Now get to the car." The Saito enforcers were being cut down with clinical precision. Minho's team was a machine of war. But Kenji had one last move. He pulled a small hidden pistol from his sleeve and aimed it at my father's chest. "If I go, you go, ghost." Kenji screamed. I was too far away. Minho was pinned down. My father was looking at Kenji, his eyes wide. The shot rang out. But it didn't come from Kenji. It came from the shadows of the crane above. A single bullet took Kenji in the eye, dropping him instantly. I looked up. A silhouette stood on the gantry, holding a long-range rifle. It was the quiet brother, my father's youngest sibling, the one they said had disappeared years ago. He had been our guardian angel the entire time. If this story broke your heart the way it broke mine, leave a like so I know to tell more stories like this. We returned to the estate as the sun began to bleed over the horizon. Sarah and Chloe were sent home in black cars, their memories wiped by a combination of trauma and a very large cash payment to their parents to keep them quiet. They would never speak my name again. They would never mock anyone again. They were broken. Tiffany remained. She stood in the foyer, still in her factory uniform, looking at the glass walls and the black stone. "Why didn't you send me home?" she asked. "Because you're still working off your debt," I said. "And because I need someone who knows what I am. Everyone else in this world is a liar. You've seen the blood. You're the only honest thing I have left." I walked into the study. My father was sitting in his large leather chair, a bandage on his forehead. He looked tired. He looked old. He held out the silver dragon pin, the one he had taken from my dress at the gala. "It's time," he said. "Time for what?" "To lead. I'm going to Japan to settle the remaining accounts with the Saito clan. I might not come back, Elena. The Ghost of Busan is a title that requires a sacrifice. I've made mine. Now you must make yours." He handed me this shadow ledger, the black file with the silver dragon. "This is the city. This is the country. Everyone on these pages is yours. You can protect them or you can burn them. But you must never let them see you bleed." I took the file. It was heavier than it looked. I looked at the silver dragon on the pin. It was small, but it felt like it was glowing. I realized then that my dream of being an architect wasn't dead. I was just building something different. I was building a world where people like Tiffany Vance couldn't win. I was building a fortress out of shadows. "I won't fail you," I said. "I know," my father replied. He stood up, leaning on his cane one last time. He kissed my forehead. "Goodbye, Empress." He walked out of the room followed by Minho and the team. The house felt suddenly hauntingly empty. The Seoul skyline was a forest of light and glass. I stood at the window of the penthouse, the one that used to belong to the Vance family. It was mine now. The shipping routes were humming. The stock prices were stable. The Ghost of Busan was a legend whispered in the docks, but the Empress of Seoul was the one the boardrooms feared. Tiffany entered the room. She was wearing a sharp black assistant suit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. "The board is waiting, Elena," she said. "Robert Vance is asking for an audience. He says he has a way to repay the remaining interest." "Tell him to wait," I said. I didn't turn around. I was watching a small white car pull up to the curb 60 stories below. A girl stepped out, a scholarship student, clutching her books, looking nervous as she entered the lobby for her first day of an internship. I remembered that feeling. I remembered the cold silk and the red wine. "Tiffany," I said. "Yes." "Make sure that intern is treated with respect. If anyone so much as looks at her dress the wrong way, I want to know about it." "Understood." I turned away from the window and walked to the large mahogany desk. I picked up the silver dragon pin and fastened it to my lapel. It glinted under the chandelier light, the same light that had once witnessed my shame. I opened the shadow ledger. I found the page for the host of the gala, the man who had watched and laughed while I was humiliated. I picked up a pen. "Let's start with him," I whispered. "The world thinks it's run by the people in the light, the ones with the polished names and the sparkling smiles. But as I looked at the names on the page, I knew the truth. The world is run by the ones who have been to the bottom, the ones who have felt the wine on their skin and the glass under their feet. The ones who aren't afraid to burn it all down to see the light." I sat back in the chair and waited for the boardroom doors to open. My palms were dry. My tie felt like a crown. I wasn't the scholarship girl anymore. I was the fire.